If the woman standing in front of you carried your child, would you recognize the truth before it was too late? The rain hammered against the towering glass walls of Whitmore Group headquarters as Emily Carter stepped through the revolving doors at exactly 11:47 p.m., drawing startled glances from the night security staff. Water dripped from the hem of her light gray coat onto the polished marble floor, leaving a trail behind her as she paused to steady her breathing. One hand rested protectively over the unmistakable curve beneath her coat, while the other tightened around a weathered leather envelope that looked as though it had traveled through months of uncertainty. Her cheeks were pale from exhaustion, her hair damp from the storm, but her blue eyes carried a quiet determination that no amount of rain could wash away. The young receptionist looked up from the security desk with polite confusion. "Ma'am, the building is closing." Emily offered a faint smile that never reached her eyes. "Please tell Nathan Whitmore I'm not here to ask for money." The receptionist hesitated before asking, "Do you have an appointment?" Emily slowly shook her head. "No, just tell him I'm here because our baby may not survive the night." The words seemed to freeze the air inside the silent lobby. The receptionist blinked, unsure whether she had heard correctly, then reached for the internal phone with trembling fingers. 40 floors above, Nathan Whitmore stood alone in the executive conference room overlooking Manhattan. The city lights shimmered beneath the rain like scattered stars, reflecting across the massive windows behind him. At 42, Nathan had built Whitmore Group into one of the country's fastest-growing investment firms, and tonight he had finally completed negotiations on the largest acquisition in company history. His executive team had gone home hours earlier, but Nathan remained, reviewing contracts one last time with the same relentless discipline that had made him one of America's most respected CEOs. His tailored charcoal suit remained immaculate despite the late hour, his expression calm and unreadable as he signed another document. The silence was broken only by the vibration of the private phone reserved for emergencies. His assistant's voice carried an unusual hesitation. "Sir, there's someone downstairs asking to see you." Nathan barely looked up. "Tell them to schedule a meeting tomorrow." A pause followed. "She says her name is Emily Carter." The pen stopped moving. For several seconds Nathan said nothing at all. The room suddenly felt much colder than before. Emily Carter. 2 words he had spent nearly a year training himself not to think about. Their divorce had been finalized 8 months earlier after years of growing distance, endless misunderstandings, and conversations that slowly turned into silence. Walking away had seemed like the only decision either of them could still agree on. He had convinced himself it was finished, permanent, necessary. Yet hearing her name again reopened a place he believed had long since healed. Nathan finally spoke. "Why is she here?" His assistant inhaled carefully before answering. She said she's pregnant." Nathan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Pregnant?" "Yes, sir." The assistant lowered her voice. "She also said, the baby may not survive the night." Nathan stared through the rain-soaked skyline without seeing any of it. His mind rejected the sentence before it could even settle. Pregnant? Impossible. They had signed the divorce papers months ago. The timeline made no sense. His heartbeat remained steady, but something deeper inside him shifted in quiet disbelief. "Tell security she must be mistaken," he said evenly. "I'm not available." The assistant did not respond immediately. Instead, she spoke one final sentence. "Sir, she isn't asking to come upstairs. She's just standing in the lobby. She said she'll wait until midnight if that's what it takes." Nathan slowly turned toward the dark window, where his own reflection stared back at him with an expression he hardly recognized. Outside, thunder rolled across the city while, far below, one solitary figure remained motionless beneath the bright lobby lights, refusing to leave despite the storm. And for reasons he could not yet explain, Nathan suddenly found himself unable to return to the contract waiting on his desk. The elevator doors opened with a quiet chime as Nathan Whitmore stepped into the private lobby reserved for the executive floor, his measured footsteps echoing through the nearly empty building. Every instinct told him to turn around, return upstairs, and leave the past where it belonged. Yet the image of Emily standing alone in the rain refused to leave his mind. When the security door slid open, he saw her exactly where his assistant had described. She had not moved. Her damp coat clung to her shoulders, and one hand remained gently over her stomach as though shielding the life growing inside her from everything else in the world. She looked thinner than he remembered, more tired, yet there was still something unmistakably familiar about the quiet strength in her posture. Emily slowly lifted her eyes when she heard his footsteps. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. Months of silence stretched between them, heavier than the storm outside. Nathan was the first to break it. "You should not have come here." His voice remained calm, almost detached, but Emily recognized the guarded distance that had slowly replaced warmth during the final year of their marriage. She gave a small nod. "I know." Nathan folded his hands into the pockets of his coat. "Then why are you here?" Emily looked down for only a second before meeting his eyes again. "Because waiting any longer could cost me everything." Nathan's expression hardened. His gaze drifted toward the curve beneath her coat before returning to her face. "If you came here expecting sympathy because you are pregnant, you came to the wrong place." Emily did not flinch. She seemed almost prepared for those words. "I did not come for sympathy." "Money?" Nathan asked flatly. "No." "An apology?" She slowly shook her head. "No." Nathan exhaled quietly, frustration beginning to replace uncertainty. "Then tell me why you were standing in my lobby at almost midnight after disappearing from my life." Emily carefully reached into her leather envelope, but did not remove anything. Instead, she held it close against her chest. "I only needed you to see me before it was too late." Nathan frowned. "I am seeing you." "No," Emily answered softly. "You are only seeing what you think happened." Her answer unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. He searched her face for signs of manipulation, rehearsed emotion, or hidden motives, but found only exhaustion. Even so, logic remained on his side. They had divorced months earlier. They had signed every document, divided every account, returned every key. There had been nothing left between them except signatures on legal papers and memories neither of them wanted to revisit. His voice became firmer. "How far along are you?" Emily hesitated. "Far enough that I cannot pretend everything will be fine anymore." Nathan's jaw tightened. "That is not an answer." She lowered her eyes briefly. "Almost 7 months." The number landed between them like a stone. Nathan immediately began calculating dates, counting backward through months already marked by lawyers, board meetings, and the painful final chapter of their marriage. None of it fit the version of events his mind had accepted since the divorce. "That is impossible," he said quietly. "You know it is not." "No," Nathan replied, taking a deliberate step backward. "I know exactly when our marriage ended." Emily looked at him with sadness rather than anger. "Our marriage ended long before we signed those papers." Nathan said nothing. She was right about that much. Their home had become painfully quiet during those last months together. Long dinners eaten in silence. Separate bedrooms. Conversations reduced to schedules and obligations. They had lived beneath one roof while feeling worlds apart. Even remembering those days left an ache he rarely allowed himself to acknowledge. Emily slowly placed the leather envelope onto the reception desk without pushing it toward him. "Everything you need to know is inside." Nathan made no effort to reach for it. "If there is evidence, send it to my attorney." Emily closed her eyes for a moment as though gathering what little strength she had left. This is not about lawyers anymore. A wave of dizziness crossed her face so suddenly that she instinctively reached for the edge of the marble counter. Nathan noticed the movement immediately. Despite himself, he stepped forward. "Are you all right?" She nodded too quickly. "I have been better." "You look pale." A faint smile appeared on her lips. "That is probably because I have not slept much." Nathan caught himself showing concern and immediately retreated behind his composure. "You should be at a hospital instead of standing here." Emily looked directly into his eyes. "That is exactly where I have to go next." Before Nathan could respond, she turned toward the revolving doors. The storm outside had not weakened. She paused only once, glancing back over her shoulder. "I never expected you to believe me tonight." Her voice was barely louder than the rain against the glass. "I only hoped that when the truth finally reached you, you would not be too late." Then she stepped into the darkness beyond the lobby doors, leaving the leather envelope resting alone on the polished marble counter as the digital clock behind the reception desk quietly changed from 11:59 p.m. to 12 a.m. The lobby fell silent after the revolving doors completed one final turn and Emily disappeared into the storm. Nathan remained exactly where he was, staring through the glass as her figure slowly blended into the sheets of rain until she was no longer visible. He had spent months convincing himself that distance was the only way forward, yet watching her leave felt strangely familiar, as though he had already lived through the same moment once before and failed to stop it. The receptionist quietly cleared her throat. "Sir." Nathan turned without answering. His eyes settled on the worn leather envelope Emily had left behind. It rested alone on the marble counter, damp around the edges where raindrops had fallen from her coat. He had every reason to leave it untouched. His attorneys would tell him to avoid opening anything connected to his former wife without legal representation. His rational mind repeated the same conclusion again and again. None of this made sense. None of it fit the timeline he had accepted. Yet the envelope remained there, impossible to ignore. After several long seconds, he finally reached for it. The leather felt older than he expected, softened by years of use. Inside were only 3 items. The first was a folded ultrasound image. Nathan stared at the grainy black and white picture without fully understanding why his breathing had slowed. He had never imagined himself looking at something like this after the divorce. There was no name written across the front, only a hospital identification label partially covered by another sheet of paper. The second item was a simple silver wedding band. His wedding band. He had searched for it after the divorce, believing it had been lost during the move from their house. Emily had apparently kept it all this time. Nathan slowly closed his fingers around the ring, memories returning with uncomfortable clarity. The afternoon he had slipped it onto her finger, the promises they had made, the quiet Sunday mornings when neither of them had believed anything could ever separate them. He quickly forced those thoughts away. Memories changed nothing. The final item was a sealed hospital envelope with his name written across the front in Emily's familiar handwriting. Nathan hesitated before opening it. Inside was a single page from St. Matthew Medical Center requesting that Emily Carter return immediately for additional monitoring due to complications related to her pregnancy. A handwritten note had been added beneath the printed instructions. "If you are reading this, it means I've finally found the courage to come. I never wanted your money. I only wanted you to know before someone else had to tell you." Nathan read the sentence twice. Then a third time. He looked toward the lobby doors again, suddenly realizing she had never actually asked him for anything. She had not demanded support. She had not argued. She had not even tried to convince him that the child was his. She had simply appeared, left the envelope, and walked away. His assistant hurried into the lobby carrying a tablet. "Sir, your car is waiting." Nathan barely acknowledged her. Did anyone see which direction she went? The security guard checked the exterior cameras. She crossed Fifth Avenue on foot about 2 minutes ago. After that, the weather blocked most of the view. Nathan nodded slowly. Outside, the rain had become heavier, reducing visibility across the city. Emily had looked exhausted before she left. The image of her steadying herself against the reception desk replayed in his mind. For the first time that night, doubt crept into the certainty he had been holding on to. He looked again at the ultrasound. Something caught his attention. The examination date. His eyes narrowed. He quietly counted backward through the calendar in his mind. Once. Then again. His expression changed almost imperceptibly. The date did not immediately prove anything, but it no longer supported the conclusion he had repeated to himself downstairs. It raised a possibility he had refused to consider. Nathan reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. His thumb hovered over Emily's contact information. The number was still saved even though neither of them had spoken since the divorce. He pressed call. A recorded message answered almost immediately. "The number you have dialed is currently unavailable. Please try again later." He ended the call without leaving a message. Then he tried again. The same recording answered. Nathan lowered the phone, feeling an unfamiliar sense of urgency replacing his earlier confidence. His assistant watched him carefully. "Sir, is everything all right?" Nathan looked toward the rain beyond the glass. "No," he answered honestly. "I think something is very wrong." Before anyone could say another word, the private phone in his coat began ringing. The caller identification displayed only one name. St. Matthew Medical Center. The call lasted only a few seconds, yet by the time Nathan lowered the phone, the certainty he had carried all evening had begun to crumble. The calm voice on the other end introduced herself as a nurse from St. Matthew Medical Center before asking a question that caught him completely off guard. "Are you Mr. Nathan Whitmore?" "Yes." We are trying to reach Ms. Emily Carter. She missed her scheduled monitoring appointment this evening, and her physician is concerned because of complications noted during her last examination. We found your name listed as the emergency contact on paperwork completed several months ago. Have you spoken with her tonight? Nathan looked through the rain toward the empty sidewalk outside the building. She left here only a few minutes ago. Do you know where she was going? No. The nurse paused. If you hear from her, please ask her to come directly to the hospital. Her doctor does not want her delaying any longer. The line disconnected before Nathan could ask another question. He stood motionless, replaying every word Emily had spoken downstairs. She had said she needed him to know before someone else told him. She had said she was going to the hospital next. She had never once asked him to believe her. The receptionist quietly gathered her belongings, sensing that no one was going home anytime soon. Nathan picked up the ultrasound again. The examination date continued to bother him. He opened his calendar application and searched back through old appointments. Board meetings, investor conferences, court hearings during the divorce. Then his eyes stopped on one forgotten weekend nearly 7 months earlier. The weekend after the judge had postponed the final hearing because of a paperwork issue. They had still been legally married. Nathan remembered returning to the house to collect a few remaining files from his office. Emily had been there packing boxes. Neither of them had planned to stay long. Yet a power outage caused by a spring storm had left them trapped inside together for hours. They had shared dinner by candlelight simply because there was nothing else to do. For one evening they stopped arguing. They laughed at old stories. They spoke honestly for the first time in months. They admitted how tired they both were. When the lights finally returned, neither of them wanted to break the fragile peace that had unexpectedly returned to the house. Nathan closed his eyes. It had been one quiet night, filled with forgiveness instead of resentment. The following morning they had gone back to reality without speaking about it again. He had buried the memory because remembering it only made the divorce hurt more. Now that single forgotten evening refused to stay buried. His assistant looked at him carefully. Sir. Nathan slowly opened his eyes. Cancel everything tomorrow. Your breakfast meeting with the governors? Everything. She nodded without another question. Nathan slipped the wedding band into his coat pocket and picked up his car keys himself instead of waiting for his driver. 20 minutes later, his black sedan pulled away from Whitmore Group and entered the rain-soaked streets of Manhattan. Traffic had almost disappeared because of the weather, but the windshield wipers struggled to keep pace with the steady downpour. Nathan dialed Emily's number again through the hands-free system. Once more, the recording answered. The number you have dialed is currently unavailable. He ended the call without speaking. At the next red light, another memory surfaced unexpectedly. Emily sitting at their kitchen table months before the divorce, quietly filling out medical insurance forms. He remembered joking that she listed him as her emergency contact, even though she claimed to be the independent one in the marriage. She had smiled and answered, "Some habits are hard to break." At the time, neither of them had imagined how meaningful that simple decision might someday become. Nathan tightened his grip on the steering wheel. If she had never changed those documents, then she had trusted him long after everything else between them had fallen apart. The realization settled heavily over him. His phone suddenly vibrated again. This time it was an unfamiliar number. He answered immediately. "Mr. Whitmore," a worried female voice asked. "My name is Laura Bennett. I volunteer at Saint and Community Center. I found this number listed under emergency contacts in Ms. Carter's wallet. I think you should come. She was on her way to the hospital, but she became very weak outside our building. An ambulance has already been called." Nathan's heart sank. "Is she conscious?" There was a brief silence before Laura answered softly. "She keeps saying one thing over and over. She says, 'Please do not let him arrive too late.'" The tires splashed through rainwater as Nathan accelerated across nearly empty streets, every traffic light feeling impossibly slow. The address Laura Bennett had given him was only a few miles away, yet the drive felt longer than the entire year that had separated him from Emily. For the first time since their divorce, he was no longer thinking like a chief executive solving a problem. He was thinking like a man terrified that he had misunderstood the most important person in his life. When he arrived outside Saint and Community Center, flashing ambulance lights reflected across the wet pavement. Volunteers stood beneath the entrance canopy, speaking quietly as paramedics loaded equipment into the ambulance. Nathan parked without waiting for valet service and hurried toward the entrance. A woman in her early 50s stepped forward the moment she saw him. "Mr. Whitmore?" she asked. "I am Laura Bennett." Nathan nodded immediately. "Where is Emily?" Laura pointed toward the ambulance. "They are getting ready to leave for St. Matthew Medical Center." Nathan looked through the open rear doors and caught his first glimpse of Emily since she had walked away from his building. She lay on the stretcher with a blanket covering her shoulders, her eyes closed, one hand resting protectively over her stomach even in her exhausted state. An oxygen mask covered part of her face, but she looked peaceful rather than frightened. Nathan instinctively stepped closer until a paramedic gently stopped him. "Family?" the paramedic asked. Nathan hesitated only briefly. "I am her former husband." The paramedic studied him for a second before nodding. "She has been asking for someone named Nathan ever since we arrived. She is stable at the moment, but her physician wants to evaluate both mother and baby as quickly as possible." Nathan felt a weight settle across his chest. Emily had asked for him, even after the cold reception she had received only an hour earlier. Laura quietly approached his side. "She came to our community center every Wednesday evening," she explained. Nathan looked at her with surprise. "Why?" She volunteered. His expression changed. "Volunteered?" Laura smiled gently despite the circumstances. "She organized financial literacy classes for single parents. Most of them never knew she was expecting because she did not like making herself the center of attention." Nathan struggled to reconcile those words with the assumptions he had carried for months. Laura continued softly. "She always spoke highly of you." Nathan stared at her in disbelief. "That cannot be true." "It is." Laura folded her hands together. "Whenever someone asked whether the baby's father would be involved, she never criticized you. She only said that life sometimes separates good people before they have the chance to understand each other." Nathan lowered his eyes. Those words hurt more than anger would have. He had expected resentment, not kindness. Laura reached into her shoulder bag. "There is something else." She removed a small notebook with a navy blue cover. "Emily left this with me 3 weeks ago. She said if anything unexpected happened before she found the courage to speak with you herself, I should give it to Nathan Whitmore." Nathan accepted the notebook carefully. It was worn from frequent use, and Emily's handwriting appeared on the first page. He opened it slowly. The first entries were ordinary reminders about medical appointments, grocery lists, and volunteer schedules. Then his eyes stopped on a dated entry written months earlier. "Today I almost called Nathan again. I wanted to tell him everything, but I remembered how tired he looked the last day we stood in court. He deserved peace, even if it meant carrying this alone for a little longer." Nathan swallowed hard before turning another page. "I hope one day our child knows that his father is not a cruel man. He only believes the story he was given because I never found the courage to tell him mine." Nathan closed the notebook, unable to read further. Rain continued falling around them, but he barely noticed it anymore. The ambulance doors closed with a quiet metallic sound. A paramedic leaned out through the open window. "If you are coming, you should follow us now." Nathan nodded without hesitation. As he turned toward his car, Laura called after him one final time. "Mr. Whitmore." He looked back. "Emily has been carrying one more secret." Nathan frowned. "What do you mean?" Laura's eyes filled with quiet concern. "She never came back tonight because she wanted your forgiveness. She came because her doctor finally convinced her that there was something in her medical file you deserved to know before the baby was born." By the time Nathan reached St. Matthew Medical Center, the ambulance had already disappeared behind the emergency entrance. The rain continued falling across the parking lot, but he barely noticed as he hurried through the sliding glass doors. The bright lights of the hospital replaced the darkness outside, and the quiet efficiency of nurses and physicians filled the corridors. A receptionist looked up as Nathan approached the desk. "I am looking for Emily Carter. She arrived by ambulance a few minutes ago." The receptionist checked her computer before offering a reassuring smile. "She is being evaluated now. Please have a seat. Someone will speak with you shortly." Waiting had always been something Nathan disliked. As the head of a company, he was accustomed to solving problems immediately. Tonight there was nothing he could control. He sat alone beneath the soft glow of the waiting room lights, Emily's navy notebook resting in his hands. After several minutes, he opened it again, this time continuing beyond the pages he had been unable to finish. One entry stopped him almost immediately. "The doctor asked whether I wanted to remove Nathan as my emergency contact after the divorce. I could not do it. Not because I expected him to come back, but because deep inside I still believe that if something truly mattered, he would never leave me alone. Nathan closed his eyes for a brief moment before reading further. Another page carried a date from nearly 4 months earlier. Today the baby kicked for the first time while I was teaching at the community center. Everyone celebrated with me. I smiled because they were happy, but afterward I cried in my car. I wish Nathan could have felt that tiny miracle too. He deserved that memory, even if he never knew it happened. Nathan slowly lowered the notebook. Every page revealed a version of Emily he had never imagined during the months after their separation. She had not spent her pregnancy blaming him. She had spent it protecting his memory for a child who had not even been born yet. His thoughts were interrupted when a woman in a white coat approached. "Mr. Whitmore?" He stood immediately. "Yes. I am Dr. Rebecca Lawson, Emily's maternal fetal specialist." Nathan shook her hand. "How is she?" The doctor's expression remained calm, but serious. "She is stable for now, and the baby is stable as well. We are monitoring them both very closely." Nathan released a quiet breath he had not realized he had been holding. "May I see her?" "Soon," Dr. Lawson answered gently. "There are a few things we should discuss first." She led him into a small consultation room away from the waiting area. Medical charts rested neatly on the desk, and Emily's file lay open beside them. Dr. Lawson folded her hands. "Emily has attended every appointment, followed every recommendation she could, and done everything possible to protect this pregnancy despite some unexpected complications." Nathan listened without interrupting. "She has been remarkably determined," the doctor continued. "What surprised our entire team was not her medical condition. It was her repeated request concerning you." Nathan frowned slightly. "Me?" Dr. Lawson nodded. "At every visit, she asked us not to contact you unless it became absolutely necessary. She believed you deserved the chance to build your new life without being pulled backward by guilt." Nathan looked away, unable to respond. "Tonight," Dr. Lawson continued, "she changed her mind. She said you had a right to know the truth before the baby arrived." Nathan finally asked the question that had haunted him all evening. "Is the baby?" His voice faltered. "Is the baby mine?" Dr. Lawson studied him quietly before answering. "Emily instructed me not to discuss paternity until she could speak with you herself. She wanted the truth to come from her, not from a medical chart." Nathan accepted the answer, though it only deepened the uncertainty inside him. The doctor reached into Emily's file and removed a sealed envelope. "She left this with us 2 months ago." Nathan recognized Emily's handwriting immediately. Across the front were only 6 simple words. "For Nathan, only if I cannot speak." Nathan stared at the envelope without opening it. His hands remained still. "Should I read it now?" Dr. Lawson smiled softly. "That decision belongs entirely to you." Before Nathan could answer, a nurse knocked gently on the consultation room door. "Dr. Lawson, Ms. Carter is awake." Nathan instinctively took one step toward the hallway. The nurse smiled at him. She asked only one question. Nathan felt his heartbeat quicken. What did she ask? The nurse looked directly into his eyes before quietly replying. "She wanted to know whether you came anyway." The nurse quietly opened the hospital room door before stepping aside. Nathan paused at the threshold, suddenly uncertain in a way he had never experienced during billion-dollar negotiations or public speeches. Emily lay resting against a raised hospital bed, the monitors beside her producing soft, steady sounds that filled the silence. Her face remained pale from exhaustion, yet the moment she saw him standing there, a small expression of relief replaced the worry in her eyes. For several seconds neither of them spoke. Everything that had happened during the past year seemed too large to fit into ordinary words. Nathan finally walked closer until he stood beside her bed. "I came," he said softly. Emily looked at him as though she had been hoping to hear those 2 words for months. "I was not sure you would." Nathan pulled a chair closer and sat beside her. "Neither was I." A faint smile appeared on her face before disappearing just as quickly. "Thank you for coming anyway." Nathan noticed how carefully she kept one hand over her stomach, almost instinctively protecting the child she carried. For the first time, he allowed himself to look without anger or suspicion. Instead, he saw only a woman who had faced months of uncertainty almost entirely alone. "The doctor said you have been following every appointment," he said quietly. Emily nodded. "I promised myself I would do everything I could." even without asking anyone for help. She lowered her eyes. I had help. Nathan frowned slightly. From who? People who cared without asking questions. She thought briefly of Laura, the volunteers, the elderly neighbors who brought meals after medical appointments, and strangers who had become friends. They reminded me that kindness still exists. Nathan felt a sharp ache settle inside him. He had spent months believing Emily had disappeared because she wanted him out of her life. Now he was beginning to understand that she had disappeared because she believed it was the kindest thing she could do for him. He slowly reached into his coat pocket and placed the silver wedding band on the bedside table. Emily stared at it in surprise. You found it. Nathan shook his head. You kept it. Emily looked at the ring for several seconds before answering. I could never throw it away. It reminded me that once we loved each other enough to promise forever. Nathan did not immediately respond. Instead, he remembered the notebook resting in his coat pocket. I read some of what you wrote. Emily closed her eyes briefly. Then you know I never hated you. Why? Nathan asked, his voice filled with quiet confusion. After everything that happened, why? Emily slowly opened her eyes again. Because anger would not have made our child feel loved. The words settled heavily between them. Nathan looked down at his hands. I owe you an apology. Emily gently shook her head. Not yet. He looked back at her. Not yet. There are still things you do not know. Before Nathan could ask another question, Dr. Lawson entered the room carrying Emily's medical chart. She smiled warmly after seeing both of them together. I am glad you are both here. There is something we need to discuss. Nathan stood immediately. Please, tell us everything. Dr. Lawson placed the chart on the counter before speaking carefully. Emily's pregnancy has required additional monitoring because of a condition that developed several weeks ago. It is manageable, but we have been preparing for the possibility that the baby could arrive earlier than expected. Nathan instinctively glanced toward Emily. She offered him a reassuring smile despite her obvious fatigue. That is why I came to see you tonight, she admitted. I wanted you to know before life made the decision for both of us. Dr. Lawson nodded. There is one more matter. She opened the medical file and removed a laboratory report. Earlier this afternoon, we completed routine prenatal testing that included genetic confirmation for medical planning purposes. Nathan felt his heartbeat quicken. The doctor looked from Emily to Nathan before continuing. Emily asked me not to discuss the results unless both of you were present. Emily slowly reached across the bed and took Nathan's hand for the first time since their divorce. Her fingers trembled slightly, but she did not let go. Nathan looked at her in surprise. She whispered only 4 words. Please hear everything first. Dr. Lawson opened the report, her expression calm and professional. Mr. Whitmore, she said gently, the genetic testing confirms that you are the biological father of the baby. The room remained completely silent after Dr. Lawson finished speaking. Nathan could hear nothing except the quiet rhythm of the heart monitor beside Emily's bed. He looked from the doctor to Emily, searching for any sign that this was some misunderstanding, but all he found was the gentle sadness in Emily's eyes and the warmth of her hand still resting in his. Months of certainty collapsed in a single moment. Every conclusion he had drawn, every accusation he had silently believed, every reason he had used to protect himself suddenly felt painfully incomplete. Nathan slowly lowered his head, unable to meet Emily's eyes. I was wrong, he whispered. Emily did not answer immediately. Instead, she gently squeezed his hand as though trying to comfort the very person who had doubted her. Dr. Lawson quietly closed the medical file. I will give both of you some privacy. After the door closed, neither of them spoke for nearly a full minute. Finally, Nathan looked up again, his voice quieter than Emily had ever heard it. Why did you not tell me the moment you found out? Emily took a slow breath before answering. I tried. Nathan frowned slightly. What do you mean? Emily looked toward the rain beyond the hospital window. 2 weeks after I learned I was pregnant, I called your office 3 times. Nathan stared at her. I never received those calls. I know. Emily gave a faint smile that carried no bitterness. After that I sent 2 letters. Nathan shook his head. I never saw any letters either. Emily nodded gently. I realized that eventually. Nathan's confusion deepened. Then why did you stop trying? Emily looked back at him. Because every attempt that failed convinced me you wanted a clean break. I remembered what you said after the divorce. You wanted both of us to move forward without reopening old wounds. I thought telling you about the pregnancy would only make you believe I was trying to hold on to a marriage that was already over. Nathan slowly covered his face with one hand. Emily, she continued softly before he could interrupt. I decided that if our child was healthy, I would raise the baby with love and never speak badly about you. If life ever brought us together again, then I would tell you everything face to face. Nathan reached into his coat and removed the sealed envelope Dr. Lawson had given him earlier. She said you wrote this in case you could not speak. Emily looked at the envelope and nodded. I hoped you would never need to open it. Nathan carefully broke the seal. Inside was only a single handwritten letter. He unfolded the page with trembling hands. The first sentence immediately caught his attention. Nathan, if you are reading this, then life became more complicated than either of us expected. I need you to know one thing before anything else. I never kept our child from you because I wanted to punish you. I stayed silent because every door I tried to open remained closed, and after a while I believed you had locked them yourself. Nathan swallowed hard before continuing. If one day you discover the truth, please do not waste your time blaming yourself forever. Use that time to love our child instead. That will always matter more than regret. Nathan could not continue reading. His vision blurred as he folded the letter closed. Emily watched him quietly. I wrote that after my second ultrasound, she admitted. I thought it would be easier for you to forgive yourself if something happened to me. Nathan immediately shook his head. Do not say that. Emily smiled gently. I am only telling you why I wrote it. Nathan reached for both of her hands now, holding them carefully. I should have looked for you. I should have asked questions instead of accepting the easiest answer. Emily's eyes softened. We both made mistakes. Nathan looked at her with quiet determination. No, we both suffered. That is different. Emily felt tears gathering in her eyes for the first time that night. Before either of them could speak again, there was another gentle knock on the door. Dr. Lawson returned carrying a small tablet. I apologize for interrupting, she said. But there is one more matter you both should know tonight. Nathan stood beside Emily's bed without letting go of her hand. The doctor smiled reassuringly before turning the screen toward them. While reviewing Emily's medical records this evening, our administrative team discovered that several messages intended for Mr. Whitmore months ago were never successfully delivered because the contact information in our notification system had been altered after Emily's first appointment. We are investigating how that happened now. Nathan felt his heart sink once again. If those messages had reached him when they were first sent, everything that followed might have been completely different. Dr. Lawson remained quietly composed as she studied the information on the tablet. We have already notified our administration department, she explained. Several automated notifications intended for Mr. Whitmore were redirected to an inactive contact profile after the first trimester. At this point, we do not know whether it was a technical error or a mistake during data entry, but we do know those messages never reached him. Nathan stared at the screen in disbelief. The missed phone calls, the letters that never arrived, the unanswered attempts. Every missing piece suddenly formed a picture that neither he nor Emily had been able to see alone. Emily let out a slow breath and closed her eyes. I kept wondering why you never answered, she admitted. After a while, I convinced myself silence was your answer. Nathan gently shook his head. If I had known, I would have come the first day. Emily looked at him with quiet sincerity. I believe that now. Those 4 words carried more forgiveness than Nathan believed he deserved. Dr. Lawson smiled warmly before excusing herself once more, leaving them alone as dawn slowly began replacing the darkness outside the hospital windows. The storm had finally passed. Soft morning light filtered through the glass, painting the room with a calm that neither of them had felt in a very long time. Nathan remained seated beside Emily, unwilling to let go of her hand. There is something I need to ask you, he said softly. Emily nodded. Anything? He hesitated, searching carefully for the right words. When this baby is born, if you are willing, I do not want to be a visitor in our child's life. I want to be a father every single day. Tears gathered in Emily's eyes again, but this time they came with a smile instead of sorrow. That is all I ever hoped for. Nathan looked down at the silver wedding band still resting on the bedside table. He picked it up and slowly turned it between his fingers. I am not asking you to forget everything that happened. Emily listened quietly. I know trust is not rebuilt with promises. It is rebuilt with ordinary days, honest conversations, and showing up when it matters. If you ever decide to give me that opportunity, I will spend the rest of my life earning it. Emily reached over and gently closed his fingers around the ring. Then do not start by looking backward, she whispered. Start by being here today. Nathan smiled for the first time in many months, not because every problem had disappeared, but because for the first time the future felt possible again. A gentle knock interrupted the moment as Dr. Lawson returned carrying a portable ultrasound monitor. I thought both of you might like to hear something together, she said. Emily nodded immediately. A few moments later the room filled with the steady, unmistakable rhythm of a tiny heartbeat. Nathan sat perfectly still as the sound echoed through the quiet room. It was small, strong, and wonderfully real. His eyes filled with tears he no longer tried to hide. Emily looked at him and smiled. Someone has been waiting a long time to meet you. Nathan laughed softly through his emotions. I think I have been waiting too. Dr. Lawson adjusted the monitor before pointing gently toward the screen. Everything looks reassuring this morning. We will continue monitoring closely, but right now both mother and baby are doing well. Relief washed across the room. Nathan leaned forward and kissed Emily gently on the forehead. Thank you, he whispered. Emily looked at him with warmth and quiet confidence. For what? For never teaching our child to hate me while I was too blind to understand the truth. Emily squeezed his hand. Love always had a better chance. Several months later, on a bright spring morning, Nathan stood beside Emily in the same hospital, holding their healthy newborn daughter for the very first time. The little girl wrapped her tiny fingers around one of his, and in that instant every board meeting, every headline, every business achievement seemed insignificant beside the simple privilege of being called her father. Nathan looked across the room at Emily, who smiled back with peaceful eyes. Their marriage had not been magically repaired by a single conversation, nor had every scar disappeared overnight. They chose instead to rebuild slowly, honestly, one day at a time, placing their daughter at the center of every decision. Sometimes life does not separate people because love was missing. Sometimes it separates them because fear speaks louder than truth. But when truth finally finds its way home, love still has the remarkable power to begin again.